At the Lemelson Foundation, our mission is to improve lives through invention, and we talk a lot about impact inventing and the importance of focusing on problems worth solving. And I have to say, these last 3 talks for me have been absolutely inspirational. These are all problems worth solving, so it's fantastic. So now we're going to turn to a panel discussion, and the panel discussion is going to dig a little deeper into a subject that was just alluded to this morning in the earlier panel, which is how do we create the next generation of inventors and focusing on invention education. And I'd like to invite my colleague, David Coronado, who's Program Officer at the Lemelson Foundation, to come up and introduce you to the panel.
Let's see, okay, there we go. Well, good morning, everyone. It's a pleasure to be out here today in sunny Boston. So it's a pleasure to be on this panel here to talk about creating the next generation of inventors and really supporting them along the inventors pathway. So I'm David Coronado. I'm Program Officer with the Lemelson Foundation. We are a family foundation based in Portland, Oregon that's focused on improving lives through invention. Sorry, make sure I don't kick that. So we do that through inspiring and educating the next generation, as well as supporting organizations who really help support those emerging inventors to help their ideas go through the innovation pathway so they become products and businesses that really truly impact lives, create jobs, and support and strengthen local economies. So before we begin, I want to do a little interactive with you to see who's in the audience. So raise your hand if you're from a higher education institution. All right, majority here. Anyone from a business or a corporation? And raise your hand if you are concerned about the current education system, both K-12 and higher education, and really inspiring and educating the next generation of inventors. Great, so we're in the right place, so I think this panel will be a good discussion for you all. It's clear that members of NEI really appreciate the importance of nurturing that next generation of inventors who really are going to solve those major critical problems, but also are going to strengthen our economy. And I think that's what we'll be discussing a little bit today. So I want to talk a little bit about the concerns that we have around the current education system and the support that along the K-12 and higher education pathway that we are losing students and we're not providing them the right mindsets and the right skills for them to really see problems and take their ideas to fruition. And so it's a critical need that the Lemelson Foundation is particularly working on, and we're pleasure to have some of our partners here with us today. So to tell you a little bit about Invention Education, Invention Education is a student-centered approach which really is about cultivating students' power to identify problems that they're passionate about, to really think critically, and to really understand the needs of the end user. It's also about helping students really take their ideas to prototyping and to create a tangible solution. It's really rooted in a strong base of STEM knowledge, and it's about providing students that entrepreneurial mindset and know-how to actually take products into businesses that will impact lives and be the underpinnings of our economy. So it's a pleasure to have our group with us today. So I've been doing this for a number of years now. I was kind of in the trenches before I got to become an ambassador for Invention Education in this role at the foundation. So I found that it's better to take a look at it first. So we're going to show you a quick video of just the first K-12 portion of Invention Education.
I had no interest in science and engineering going into high school. I actually really hated it. InventTeam had an effect on my education that I don't think any other program really could have. It exposed me to real engineering problems and the real engineering process. From there, that became what I wanted to do with the rest of my life.
Everybody got your feedback?
We're seeing invention sort of being an entry point and magnet for STEM education. When they get involved in the teamwork and get really into creating their invention, we find that they discover that this really is for them, and a lot have gone on to pursue STEM college and career pathways.
We were originally approached by our local fire department dive team who wanted some sort of search and rescue ROV to come with them on search dives that they have to do routinely in some of the ponds in our area. And we decided that since ice diving is such an issue in our area that we kind of wanted to take it one step further. We were spending countless hours a week in the lab.
Over time, I saw the excitement that they had for it. It became more about them and their ability to think at a higher level, identify problems, and come up with solutions. I was asking them to leave the shop at night.
Seeing it the first time actually move and respond to the controller, I didn't actually believe that it was happening. It was a truly indescribable experience. I felt so proud of the machine and of the rest of the team.
Programs like Invent Teams are showing how invention education can transform the life of individual kids. So they're inspired, they feel creatively empowered, they go on to take on careers that make them into problem solvers.
He says, this is an interesting idea that I've never heard of before.
I was fortunate to have 2 female students on the Invent team. They were able to bring their STEM education to the next level. And as a result, we have increased to a lot more females in my STEM classes here at Natick High School.
Mr. Scott was really great about reaching out to me and a lot of other women in the school. We do need many more people in engineering disciplines, and there are a lot of great minds who are being steered away from it. I would not be sitting where I am right now had it not been for Mr. Scott's efforts. I'm a freshman at MIT. I'm planning to declare mechanical engineering with a focus in biomechanics, and I would really love to work in healthcare technology someday. Invent Team's experience affected my education in a way that really no other program could have. You're presenting your ideas to the real world, and that has real consequences in a really great way. It's a really incredible experience.
Well, if you're not already inspired, we'll continue to inspire you more to consider this type of education. So it's my pleasure to have some of our partners here with the Lemelson Foundation on stage with me. Dr. Stephanie Couch is the Executive Director of the Lemelson MIT program. Phil Willerstein, he is the President and CEO of VentureWell. We have Dr. Aaron Kyle. He is a Senior Lecturer in Biomedical Engineering Design at Department of Biomedical Engineering at Columbia and co-founder and leader of HK Maker Lab. And we have Doug Scott of the Hopkinton School District Technology and an engineering educator, and he's the master teacher of the Lemelson MIT program. So we're just going to jump right in. Well, let's start with, since we just watched our K-12 video, let's actually just talk a little bit about that particular sector, Stephanie. So I'll start with you. I mean, you just recently joined the Lemelson MIT program back in July, and it was primarily in the STEM side of education. So I think, we've had these conversations after seeing what LMIT is doing, seeing great videos and stories like Caitlin. Where do you see the intersection of K-12 education going into the future as it relates to, what's out there, what's STEM education, and tell us how can invention education really change lives? How are you approaching it, especially for under-resourced students?
Sure. So for the last 8 years, we've seen a lot of great work at making science, technology, engineering, math education better in today's schools. But what I learned when I started talking with our own staff and our prior grantees is that the experience like the one we just saw on the video helps girls and students that we have that are underrepresented in STEM college and career pathways see why it's important to study these subjects and how these subjects can merge with others to really have a meaningful impact. And when I went back and talked to school people who were former grantees, I experienced all these stories about how kids who really didn't see STEM as something in their future, how they were transformed by this experience. And so today I was listening to the panel about how we would put these expectations on faculty and perhaps greater exposure for college students to how to invent and how to start a company. And I think the expectations, putting them out there, is half of a solution to broadening participation and generating a broader pool in the patent pool. But you also have to demystify for young women and students from backgrounds that aren't represented among today's patent holders how to meet those expectations. You have to give them hands-on experiences with what it means to invent. And what that means, if you back it up into high school, is that we can't just have great science classes. We can't just have great math classes. We have to bring those together with great art teachers who can teach design thinking. We have to bring it together with the marvelous CTE teacher who knows how to build things and how electronics work. That's a whole different kind of teaching and a different kind of course that you find at some of our high schools, like we have a representative here today, but you won't find that kind of work at the majority of high schools yet. And that's our mission, is to have more of the kind of invention education programs that bring that expertise together.
Yeah, and you have some wonderful master teachers that help bring that expertise and drive it out. So we have Doug Scott with us. I mean, Doug, you're in the trenches. You get to see it every day. We get to have these conversations of swapping education stories. But, you know, we saw you in the video, so Doug says he'll sign autographs afterwards. But we definitely want to celebrate Doug because he for us, is truly inspirational in the fact that, you know, you're a teacher you're an official inventor now. You have a patent that just got, the technology we just saw in the video was recently patented alongside your students as co-inventors of this technology. You're a master teacher, you're really inspiring and educating students. So a lot of folks will say, you're special, it can't be replicated. And also, you know, not everyone wants to become an inventor. And so can you tell us a little about what impact you have seen for yourself as well as a teacher, as well as for students who are really interested in you know, to become inventors, to become problem solvers. Even if they don't become inventors, you know, what's the impact on them?
Sure. To start out, I would just say, I would have never envisioned that I would have gone through this process. So I think any teacher is capable of it. I was a business undergraduate, and I don't know how I ended up here. But I think for myself, the impact has been, it has opened my eyes to a higher learning, higher level of learning, and higher level of thinking that was way beyond what I was doing before. Most of the things I was doing before were very typical. They were common problems that are introduced to students. I'm sure you're all familiar with egg drops and things, mousetrap cars and all these things. They're all great, and they have a lot of good fundamental lessons within them, but I really didn't see myself flipping the switch on students' minds in terms of what the possibilities for them were until I got involved with the Lemelson Foundation and worked through them and learned through them, and then ultimately, you know, bring that to the students. For students, you know, I see things like on that video, it reminds me of, you know, when I saw those students on there. And the interesting part of that whole thing is, yes, Caitlin is very driven. I think she would have been successful in any endeavor that she had chosen. But there were a lot of students involved in that project that were D-level students in high school. They weren't your typical MIT students. Some of them are now at community colleges. But what it did for them was it allowed them to see what was possible within themselves. They were able to take on a complex set of problems. They were able to go out and meet with people in the community. They were able to clearly identify a problem that existed, and they were able to invent something through a long and tedious process. I saw some great inventions up here earlier, and you know, what we did took 4 years. I'm sure that some of the things we saw up here took a lot longer than that. And I think the thing that students need to understand is that learning is not easy, and it shouldn't always be easy. It's something that requires some grit. And the students that I had brought a lot of grit to the process, and they never gave up on anything. And I think that's really the biggest thing that students get out of it is, and I think that's just so important in life. When things don't go your way, how do you respond? And I think that has a lot to do with inventing, because a lot of things didn't go their way, probably like a lot of your projects. So in the end, I think that's really the biggest thing that they get out of it.
And so just a follow-up question, so how do you hook students into this? So there's always this discussion that students aren't interested in this type of education. So, what's the hook? How do you get them involved?
Different approaches. With female students, I find a personal invite is required. If you post something up on the wall that says STEM, Tuesday, 2:30, room number 101, they will often overlook it or think it's not for them because of the culture in the school and beyond. So a personal invite is often required. Some other students need to be challenged in a way, I may approach you and say, oh, this is an interesting project. I've seen you've done really well with these other things. I got this really hard one over here. I don't know if you can do it, but we're doing it. So if you have any interest, and I just walk away. It depends on your audience. You have to approach it in different ways. You just don't hang flyers up at school and say, yay, we're going to put together an invent team. It doesn't work like that.
Yeah.
So it's recruitment. And I think that goes back to some coaching that I did. And I think that if you think back on any coaches or teachers that you had that had the ability to recruit or identify specific skill sets within individuals and then plug them in, I think that's what's necessary.
Yeah, so we're going to kind of move into our higher education space. So Caitlin went on to school, so I know she's doing quite well at MIT. But Phil, you're working on different issues of really helping institutions really think about how do they change their culture so they can support these young inventors who are really inspired, but to continue to educate them and really drive and market. With Ventual, it's been a privilege. You guys have, and this is from your guys' side, you've created a world in which science and technology innovators have support, training, and access to networks and resources they need to solve the world's most difficult problems. And I just was in a trip in Songkop, Africa, and we're able to see some of the inventors who came through Venture supported programs, who now have businesses, who have employees, who truly are strengthening economies, creating jobs, and most of all, they're improving the lives of other people. So tell us a little bit about what does invention education look at higher education, right? Let's see, what does it look like, and what's the value add for higher education to get involved in this type of education?
Sure, and it really has been a privilege to be doing that. As many of you who are involved in this kind of work know, it is not any easier, I think, at the higher ed and level of sort of translating research innovations into useful products and impacts in the world. But when you look at this from an educational stream, I think really what we're talking about is a way of preparing people to be 21st century innovators and for them to, whether or not they are ultimately a patent holder or an entrepreneur who leads the development of a venture, the exposure to the problem solving, to the understanding that identifying a need is the basis of innovating, and the ability to have the creativity, creative thinking, and skill development at a sort of fundamental level is really critical to, I would argue, almost any university student. And I would argue that there's sort of a basic competency in society that people need to have, and that will actually lead us as a society to solve a lot of our problems. In the area of doing, I think there really is a need to create on-ramps and pathways, and we do this by trying to work with faculty who are interested in incorporating this into the earliest stages of activity. And I was just talking to one of our colleagues who's here from Texas Tech, who's created an introductory course where students work on identifying problems and solving through technical innovation for those problems, but putting those in context. And I think that context is really the key that's being created. There's an understanding of context. Then moving into how you use that understanding to develop a compelling solution, to test that solution and be able to move it forward. And the technical development is really energized by the information that comes from the real world. And I think that one of the things that we see in terms of retention rates in some of the science and engineering fields and the ability of students to persist both with their studies and with the kind of background context that they need comes together when you put this kind of target in front of them. In the work on commercialization, we've created programming that provides support environments within the educational context, as well as providing support for exceptional projects that can go forward. And Aaron has been the steward of a number of those as a faculty advisor that have reached commercialization and that have moved forward. And as you mentioned earlier, there are hundreds of companies out there founded by students that came through this program. What we see now is through the programming that we've been doing with curriculum development and the creation of innovation programming in the institutional context that's permanent and recognized as part of the educational process, this creates a stream that can then lead to both advanced innovation in the research area and commercialization through the work of graduate students. I mean, you look at how the ideas that come out of your laboratories do so, it's typically between the ears of postdoc graduate student. We've been working over the past several years with NSF to create programming that uses this kind of approach of a student-led innovator design in a program called I-Core that is now reaching the point where companies are starting to spin out of it very quickly. Hundreds of companies now coming out of that and a lot of commercialization. One of the interesting things that happens there is the faculty who participate in that program are inculcated into a different way of thinking about how they approach application for their ideas. And what we're seeing there is the creation of, I think, a seedbed for much greater and sustained innovation across the departments. There was some discussion in the questions after the last panel about how do you get this to spread within a department that may be fairly traditional in its thinking. And I think just like with the students, it's through having an experience and doing it that people become receptive and open to it. So I think what I've seen over the past couple of decades is a rapidly accelerating acceptance of this. There are still issues to be resolved, and it really is, I think, a process of taking what's now become an accepted practice in small areas within elite institutions and spreading that much more broadly throughout higher education and providing a context and policy framework that enables that to happen.
Yeah, I mean, there's a lot of people that are thinking about it, but there's also a lot of people doing it, which I think has been, Adventure will open. Congratulations on a successful conference of so many people every year. That community continues to get larger and larger. And so, Aaron, I mean, you're one of the doers, right? So you're at Columbia University, you're teaching faculty, you're actually implementing and working alongside VentureWell and developing companies. And so the question for you is, you're unique in that you actually operate in two worlds. So you're helping support innovators on the higher education space, but you're also reaching further down in the pipeline for at the K-12 level with the HK Maker Lab. Maybe you could tell us a little about HK Maker Lab, but also tell us about what's the importance of higher education institutions reaching down further in the pathway, and maybe you can speak a little bit about the impact that you're seeing at both the higher education level of students who are being nurtured by Invention Education, as well as those at the K-12 level.
So thank you, David. For those of you that are unfamiliar, the HK Maker Lab is a program based out of Columbia University. It's a partnership between the Department of Biomedical Engineering and a local biotech incubator called the Harlem Biospace. And what we do is we recruit students from underserved high schools, minority populations. They come to Columbia for 6 weeks during the summer, and we go through the biodesign process from identification of a problem, figuring out for whom a solution might be important, what that customer might need, figuring out a variety of prospective solutions through a pretty rigorous brainstorming process. We go into some of the business aspects of our endeavors, looking at the market, what the reimbursement mechanisms might be, what the regulatory bodies involved might be with this device, and then we get into what I would argue is the most fun stuff. We actually build up devices. So we spend a good chunk of our time actually prototyping our devices, iteratively redesigning them until we come to a version that is appropriate for presentation and will satisfy those customer needs that are established early on. We are branching out into more avenues. We're focusing on making our summer program a professional development opportunity for teachers, where we can bring them to the Columbia campus. They can learn the design process in parallel with our students, and the hope that that will lead to the dissemination of our curricular elements throughout the local high schools. And we provide a set of internships for our students, primarily within the School of Engineering at Columbia, as well as within local biotechnology companies. So speaking to your question, David, about the impact of this and kind of the role of higher education and what the impact is for us, and what we've primarily been seeing a lot of is our students come in and they've taken their STEM classes, a lot of them have done well in their science, their engineering, their physics, but there's been this decoupling between what they've learned in the classroom and what this actually means. What am I going to use this for? What's the purpose of these classes that I'm taking? And I think that's particularly important when you're looking at, say, minority populations or those that are coming from underserved schools where you're doing all this stuff, but it's not clear why. What would be the motivation to pursue this as you go on to your undergraduate studies or possibly make that your career path? So that's the deficit that kind of spurred my interest in starting this work, is saying, okay, we have to show these kids that there is this pathway that comes from being good in your science and mathematics classes, that you can use this for solving real-world problems and tying that into the things that they might experience in their own communities, things they might have heard about on the news, is really what we're trying to fill, getting them familiar with the process of solving problems and taking it that step further to show them that they can be the ones to solve these problems. I mean, that's a lot of the feedback we get from our students is, I didn't know what engineering was, I didn't know how I could apply all these sorts of things. I had no idea I could solve these sorts of problems. I think it's kind of akin to what Doug probably sees a lot as well. And the argument you can make is you can be an innovator at any level. You just have to maybe have that initial nudge towards doing it. So that's the impact I believe we're starting to see in the students that are joining us this summer. And that's why I hope to expand this. And Doug and I were speaking shortly before the panel began about if you're doing this with a larger cohort of students, not just the 24 or so students who join us for the summer on a voluntary basis, but those that are taking this as a part of the regular curriculum, how can we engender this appreciation? How can we make people excited about the prospect of innovation? Not saying that everybody has to be inventors, but speaking more towards Phil's point about everybody having this kind of mindset to be problem solvers, or at the very least, those that can identify problems. So that's a sort of impact I think we might have, and I mean that's kind of a softer impact. The more explicit things are seeing our students going to high caliber institutions. I get very excited when I see one of my students decide to pursue biomedical engineers because it means I've done my job well. But that's the sort of thing we're working towards. And again, building up our curricular elements. And on the higher education level, a lot of what I'm seeing is coming via the students who assist me in the programs during the summer. So seeing them become increasingly excited about not only their own innovation education, which goes part and parcel with being in our department, but also developing this appreciation for outreach and giving of these skills that they've developed over the years to the community and showing that, look, I'm not just taking a bunch of class, I'm not just going to go out and be an engineer or whatever else successful is going to come of my undergraduate education, but actually learning how I can use these skills to possibly lift up the next generation of people that might be interested in this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, Aaron, you really speak to the idea that it really has to be, what you're doing has to be part of the culture of the organization, right? So it's not a standalone thing, and you're slowly making inroads. It becomes part of the culture of the organization. I mean, Phil, you work a lot on this about making a part of a culture institution, but it's hard, right? We talk about mindsets. An institution has to have the right mindset to really want to instill this into their culture. So, I mean, there are a number of different challenges to getting this into the higher education environment. Maybe you can speak to a few of the challenges, and I know there are many, but maybe also provide us some tools and opportunities where we can, people can look to you towards instilling this in their environments.
Yeah, start with the beginning, which I think Aaron was referring to, is, getting a pipeline of students into this who are primed for what they're going to participate in. In particular, having that pipeline actually look like the demographics of the country. And that is not an insignificant challenge. When we look at the pool of students we're pulling from, it's not at all representative of the population at large. And so there's a sort of upstream challenge there. I think that the second piece of that is making space in the curriculum to do this. And frankly, what I see works best is actually assuming that it should be part of the curriculum and doing it as a mechanism for learning, which has some really great beneficial outcomes. And the presumption is typically that this needs to be something that's sort of standalone with a wall around it. And what we've seen is lots of successful models in which this is fully integrated across a four-year curriculum. Many of those interactions are not more resource intensive than what's done already, and there's some very, very large institutions that are doing this at very big scale. and doing things that are actually increasing the efficiency of some of the things that they do, like, for example, undergraduate lab experiences. When you integrate the tools for innovation into a setting where students can also use that to do their sort of fundamental lab requirement science deliverables, you actually can bring both the need for efficiency together with opportunities for innovation and sort of the community interplay that can happen by mixing people doing different kinds of things together. The third is providing resources to do this, and the Lemelson Foundation really has been a leader in this space. Through our program, we have funds to support curricular innovation. A number of people in the room here who have benefited from those grants and done some really creative work in creating hands-on, experiential, E-team-based activity. E-teams are student-led teams of innovators, and we have funds to help those teams develop innovations in the form of grants to students. And we've coupled those financial supports with information and learning. So we have actually, over on the waterfront on Dry Dock Avenue, we're running a workshop for 10 student teams who are selected in a recent grants round. And they'll be learning how to and looking for value in the propositions that they've got. For faculty, learning resources and communities of practice are critical to taking things forward, to being able to sell things back home. We have a lot of resources that you can tap into, including networks for curricular development, for programming. We're a organization that operates on a membership basis, so you can join, and we're collaborating with NAI and looking forward to expanding opportunities to do that. The final thing I would mention is enabling some of the barriers to be removed. So this has been talked about a few times already this morning in terms of tenure and promotion requirements, which is something that we have some thoughts about in the context of teaching and leading innovation as a hallmark of being a innovator and having recognition for that kind of work. Overlaps a little bit with what the hallmarks of recognition and what the requirements for tenure are. And have some great models that we've seen implemented that incorporate this kind of learning outcomes and patents by students, publications by students that emerge as things that count towards faculty activity. The other is policy modification. I think for this group is a really important area. We came out last year with a policy chapter manual with Autumn that established good practice for helping students to not have barriers to moving forward with their IP and to do it in concert with the institutional policies instead of in opposition to it. And I think that there's still a lot of work to be done there to create kind of pro-intellectual property, pro-student policies that actually stimulate innovation. To sum it up, there's really a need to both support innovation, support the exemplars, provide them with resources to succeed, celebrate that success as is being done here. I think the academy approach and the recognition of leadership is really a critical piece of it, but it needs to be followed up with support and programming to take it to scale. So I'd be happy to talk with folks afterwards about some of the ways to get involved doing that.
So Aaron, I mean, along that same topic about, how can higher education institutions better support you as a faculty member doing this daily to really think about, how can they help you, how can they help support you and including invention education into daily curricula on both not only those students at the higher education level, but also supporting your efforts to reach further down into the pipeline?
So I want to be careful up front not to proselytize to anyone. I know that different universities have different missions and different goals, but I think there is a lot of opportunity, particularly with regards to the outreach and the invention education part of things, specifically with regards to engineering departments. So you can look at it at different levels. It kind of depends on what sort of person might be pursuing this. If you're someone like myself who is teaching faculty and education is my primary mission, one can make an argument that this should probably be a part of what any teaching faculty is doing, that either part and parcel with their research or as part of their path to some degree of promotion, they should be doing some degree of outreach within the community. And if you're like myself, someone that teaches engineering design, that should be focused on engineering education. With regards to the tenure track faculty, and I think this is kind of a similar argument to what was presented during the panel earlier with regards to the importance of patents and things like that, I think it starts with obviously having departmental support for doing this sort of things, or maybe departmental ambivalence, and then giving the faculty some degree of motivation to pursue this, whether it's defraying teaching obligations elsewhere, or if this is something that will hold a degree of weight with regards to what's going to go on in their tenure package, or for that matter, simply making it clear that, look, there's the resources available, this might be a means by which you could achieve summer salary, and there are mechanisms of funding that you can pursue related to these activities. I think the big part of it is obviously motivation. You can't force people to do this sort of work. You have to have folks that actually want to do it, but then also showing that, you know, if this is the thing that you're passionate about, if this is the thing that you want to pursue, that it won't come as a penalty. If anything, it'll be almost like extra credit. It's something that you can do on top of your research obligations and show that there are things that are advantageous about this. And finally, making it clear to faculty that do this sort of thing, whatever level you're at, that by doing this, you present value. I mean, there's the altruistic value to it, that it feels good working with these young students. It's great when you see somebody build up a prototype, but also looking at it from the standpoint of possibly building up this pipeline of prospective students or innovators, people that might come to your university one day, or the person that might be the great American inventor. I think that's the sort of thing that has to be promoted more, rather than just having be kind of people with one-off passions that go after this sort of thing.
Yeah, I mean, turning to you, Stephanie, thinking about kind of, you're based in a higher ed institution actually doing outreach work. So you're based at MIT. So my question for you is, you know, why is it important for institutions of higher education to become involved in K-12 education, and what are some of the resources that institutions can use to actually get started in doing this?
Sure. Well, one of the things we know from a lot of research studies is that for high school students, near peers matter. They can be influenced by students who are just a little bit older, who came from their backyards or look like them. And so we actually have college student prizes for young inventors, both undergraduates and graduate students. The information is on our website about how students can apply. The applications are open now for the next round of awards. And we also have an award, $500,000, for a mid-career inventor, no more than 25 years post-BA. So what a great way for a younger faculty member to be recognized. So please, if you have someone to nominate, please do so. But another thing that we've learned through our invent teams is that part of the power of the experience is that students are asked to find a problem in their own backyard, and they generate something that means something to them, a problem they want to solve. And so that takes depth and breadth of resources, knowledge that can be brought to bear on any problem that the kids find. And it typically goes beyond that which might exist at a high school. And so they have to have partners who will come to the table and essentially co-teach with the high school teacher who chooses to take this on. And so the model requires a lot in order for it to be successful. And we can support at MIT 15 teams a year. So now how do we grow what we know to be a successful model to a national program? So my thinking is that if you look at which colleges and universities are generating patents, we can find at least 23 who are off the charts in terms of patents being generated. So we have to create a network of colleges and universities who commit to growing the pathway to invention for students, who come together and try to together build these models and put these resources together around high school teachers like Mr. Scott, who's so incredible, and creates these incredible teams year after year. And it's got to be part of a larger networked effort. So if anybody's interested in doing that kind of work, please get in touch with us. And we have an incredible invention education officer, Lee Esterbrooks, who's been at this for 10 years. And She has an incredible Rolodex that we call on to support the 15 teams across the U.S., but it'd be so much nicer to have a network of partnered colleges and universities that can do this work with us. We'd love to work with you.
And Doug, even along those same lines of thinking about the resources that you need to actually support your invention education efforts in your school, how can higher education institutions be a part of that?
Yeah, I would just say the first thing is to show interest and to also break down some barriers, because I think most K through 12 teachers, when they think about colleges and universities, especially research universities and people that are doing amazing work, is, you know, I don't belong there, or that's really beyond what I do. So I think if you can welcome them in and show them what you're doing and make them feel welcome, I think that makes a big difference. And that's the experience that I had with the Lemelson MIT program. I was cold called by Lee, and if that call hadn't been made and I hadn't been welcomed in, I would never envision myself walking through the doors of MIT and going through the experiences that I have. So I think it's important that you make those connections within your communities and you welcome people in. The other thing that's important is to think about getting your people out. One of the hardest things to do as a teacher is sometimes to coordinate buses and things like that for visits to, you know, places outside your school. So if you can afford to have some staff or graduate students or undergraduate students visit some high schools and have them even just assess projects or a day of mentorship. I always say, you know, people always ask me, like, well, how do you get funding? How do you do this? I don't even talk about money. Don't talk about funding, because how can you ask somebody for money unless there's some sort of relationship, collaborative relationship with that group first? So I think the biggest thing is to create that mentorship first, and asking people for the most valuable thing they have, which is their time. But it really does open up a lot of doors. So if you can do those two things, you know, open the doors up and then maybe get some people out, I think that would make a big difference for people.
Yeah, and I think one of the key themes that we're really trying to push is that we hope that invention education, this experience of really nurturing the talent, the creativity, inventiveness of every child, regardless of where you come from, your income, or your color, or your sex, that it should be a mandate, right? And so I think what we would like for the panel is to think this is an opening conversation about connecting with these folks and connecting with others to see how you can bring invention education at both to your students at the higher education level, but also thinking about how you could reach down further in the pipeline, because it really is going to be a transactional relationship going both ways if we really are going to have the impact that we're hoping to have for the future. So I don't know if we have time for a couple questions.
Hi. So that was a great session, really inspiring, really interesting. And I think there's almost a common theme to the whole morning, which is, you know, for a long time we've been trapped in the mindset, in the framework that innovation is a linear process, right? You go from a conceptual idea, from pure research, from the government-funded basic sciences, to something that's applied, to something that's tested, to something that goes to market. And I'm not saying we can't find cases of that, but of course if we study the history of invention, we find all kinds of complexity, right? Edison tinkered and experimented and made things that then inspired theoretical work in electrical engineering. And in fact, that's quite the common trail. And so, you know, one of the tensions around this tenure question that was up earlier this morning is very much that tenure is often given for more conceptual, theoretical work, but it turns out that's inspired by what people make. It's not like that just comes out of air and then we get a linear flow into consumer products. And so similarly for this panel, I guess my question to you is, you know, for working with students, it seems like the tactile, the making is absolutely an entree. Do they also then get into the more conceptual work? Do some of them in fact go into a more theoretical direction? And how do you encourage that? And others, of course, are more practically minded. And what do you do in that split, or in pulling together teams that have both of those skills?
Yeah,
can respond, at least to start off, that a couple bits of evidence. I mean, one is that students aren't dropping out because of being involved in these kind of innovation projects. They're actually going to graduate school, often to pursue the project, and typically their thesis is not an applied, I built this thing, but rather actually getting into the theoretical underpinnings of it. We're also seeing, since the program has been around for 20 years, quite a few of the folks who are interested in pursuing an academic career go on to do that. They may continue to be entrepreneurs on the side, which is actually one of the benefits of being an academic, is that you can actually do that as a chief scientific officer and other ways, and are in fact getting tenure as faculty members who will continue to live in both worlds. So I think we see that. I think there's also, for students, a really inspiring connection between the application of this often hard to get your arms around theoretical stuff that you're being exposed to and why it's relevant to you, particularly at the introductory level. And I think, you know, to the extent you can do this pre-college, it actually probably sharpens and engages students. And you heard the Invent Team's student say that about her experience and her inspiration to pursue a career in engineering, which you notice is not about search and rescue engineering. It's actually going deeper and developing some pretty significant multidisciplinary background in both biological and engineering.
We have time for one more question.
My name's Garth Paris. I'm a director of a cancer center in Sanford Burnham Cancer Center in La Jolla. And I just wonder, we've heard some wonderful things about educating the younger generation, but there's a generation of people out there now, the postdocs, the graduate students who've been trained for a job that does not exist in the life sciences. Only 7% probably now of postdocs will find a job in academia. It's less than in the biophysical sciences. And the problem I see is that we're surrounded by 750 biotech companies, but the students, trainees, have no way of getting into them because these companies don't have any research funding for that. Pharma is looking to biotech for their innovation now. And what's missing here is that we have no pharma, you don't have very little biotech that I can see, and so we're sort of missing this next step. And so you have to consider whether you're actually training these young people for something that is not existing in the biosciences at the moment and may not exist elsewhere in the future. That is funding to get into biotech, or to get into tech, and to get into the bigger industries.
I'm not sure I completely agree with that, because I think there are different aspects to biotechnology that we can still be addressing with our students. It's not an insurmountable challenge to introduce pharma at say like high school level students, maybe coupled with their basic chemistry knowledge and things like that. But with the emphasis on, say, the entrepreneurial aspects, I think you provide that early stage preparation to show students that it's not purely about the science, that there are these peripheral, I call them peripheral issues, but some might call them critical issues that go along with these prospective careers and things that they have to be appreciative of. In fact, you can make an argument that that's part of what can stir this motivation for the students to pursue this in their undergraduate studies, their graduate studies, and their postdoc, is seeing that not only could I be in the lab building this stuff up or coming up with this great new drug, but I could also build this business out of it, or I could be on the legal side of things, or I can be on the regulatory side of things. So I think depending on the emphasis of your specific program, you can be instilling that early appreciation for these different aspects that might lead to a biotech career. So respectfully, that's kind of my thought on it.
I would add to that the program called I-Corps, which is now actually spread across many of the federal funding agencies, is actually in part designed to try and address that gap between the training you typically would get preparing you to be a researcher and the connections to the applied world, and provides a really kind of intensive engagement in how you think about opportunity and how you translate opportunity to value, and that's broadly available and something definitely worth pursuing.
One last quick point is, being an inventor often requires you to be part of a team that's interdisciplinary. And how many of us have had to reinvent our careers in entirely different fields over and over again? And so I think what you learn through inventing is this exposure to other fields that lets you go to the other side of whole different area of work and apply what you know. And I think that's really important too when you come out and find there's no jobs in my field.
I just want to thank the panel, and hopefully this is an introductory conversation and not an ending conversation, so we look forward to talking to you all about this topic further.
Panel, thanks so much.
Okay, I usually don't talk this much in the meetings anymore, so to be involved in a panel and to do this is great. Thank you very much. I do have to learn. Is this the slide? The green one? It's the laser I'm doing. Okay, so it's not the green, this green one. Okay, here we go. All right. Is there an inventor in the room? Okay. I like that better than is there a doctor in the room? Okay. Well, I'm going to talk about the state of the academy for the last year. For many of you, this is the first time you will probably have seen this, so I'm going to try to introduce some programs to you and what you're doing. But this is your academy. And we have nearly 400 new academic innovators inducted into local chapters. We have now 757 fellows of the NAI, which hold 26,000 patents combined. So congratulations to all of you in previous and the new class. And when we've looked at these, just the fellows, they've helped create over 1.1 billion jobs with their technologies. We have been working hard on the federal charter, which was reintroduced to Congress. Of course, they have other things to deal with, but we keep moving forward with that. And we have our signed memorandum of agreement was renewed again with the USPTO, which gives us the opportunities to, do a number of great programs with them as well. And we have, of course, every year we put out a metric that's become more and more popular, which is the top 100 universities granted U.S. patents with the Intellectual Property Owners Association. So let me tell you about us a bit more, and that is that we have different types of membership. So unlike, I get a lot of questions, what about the other national academies? So again, they are a group of members that vote among themselves for new members. We are a little different. We have institutional membership. We have those institutions that want to make a commitment to entrepreneurship and invention and innovation in the country. And we have been growing in those institutions. So in a matter of really 5 years, we have grown to over 200 member institutions. It's probably one of the fastest growths of any academic body that has ever developed in a period of small time. We're as many of the big organizations, and we keep growing. We haven't pushed it anymore. We think 200 is a good level, 250. We have most of the research universities in the country now as members, or at least talking with others. We have individual membership. So what the institutions can do is that they can provide membership to their own inventors. You heard me earlier on the panel that the minimum qualification to be a member, individual member, is a issued U.S. patent. And that is really from our charter times with some talks and discussions with the United States Patent and Trademark Office. And we see that growing. We want to see more chapters growing at universities. In many ways, it's kind of like the development many years ago with Sigma Xi. Remember Sigma Xi as an organization with chapters, and we had very strong chapters. But we're having very strong chapters within universities now. We have about 30, 40 of them, maybe 20%, and we keep growing every year. So I would guesstimate 5 to 10 years, hopefully we'll have many chapters at universities that can utilize both for students and for faculty engagement. And then we have honorary members, which we just gave one to Carol, but we do have honorary members. We do them at the university level, so the institutions can give out honorary members. At my institution, we've given them to our president, we've given them to our mayor, our politicians. We try to get them involved in our entrepreneurship, in our invention, at our communities. And we do it at the national level, as you just saw. And so that is what the member category is for that. Now, there is continued growth of these members. As the Fellows Program has grown, the Fellows Program has actually grown so much that, and the Academy's grown, that one of the criteria as Fellows now that got incorporated last year is the contribution to the Academy. And so that will probably become more and more as the competition increases. So here's new members since 2016, when I was up here a year ago at the Washington meeting. So you can go through here. You can see the types of universities that we have, where they're at, and different approaches. And we have a government agency. Steve, thank you for joining with the SPAR. We continue to grow. We aren't just universities, we're not-for-profits, and we're agencies, and we continue to see more growth in that. We are, and one thing that I like to say is we are geodiverse. That is that one of the hallmarks of this academy is that we are all over the nation. We are also global. We have international affiliates, as you see on here, but we are around the nation. That in great early discussions with the USPTO was there is great invention everywhere in the United States. There's great universities, there's great entrepreneurs, and it's not just the East Coast and the West Coast of this country. So we really make an effort to make sure that we do push that in this academy. We have sustaining members that have contributed to us, and we want to thank them, of course. For that, we hope that other universities will become sustaining members, and we look forward to discussing that with you. And we have local chapters, as I mentioned. So there's 38 local chapters, and we have 1,700 individual members, not including fellows, that have become members through that. Looks like about a dozen or so, as I mentioned, chapters start in different places. If you want to start a chapter at your university, let us know. We have a full-time person that deals with chapters, and we will be pushing that more this year as we've kind of reached somewhat of the peak or slow growth of number of universities joining. We want to really build up what the universities do with us and how they can really get the message out across the country. So here's what you do if you want a local chapter, and so come and see us. I know I'm hungry, so I know lunch is coming, so I'm not going to go through the specifics of that. Okay, so let's talk about the NAI Fellows Program. So for those that don't know, we did not have a Fellows Program in the first year. We really were a university-based membership, and it was working with the USPTO, and I remember driving David Kapos to the airport in Tampa, who was the Undersecretary of Commerce, head of the Patent Office. And we talked about different aspects, and we talked about that he wanted to see a high-level individual membership that anyone could apply, not just through universities, that was at the level of the national academies, that these people were of that peer, that they had reached the peak of their personal careers, and that they did something extra. And that was that they were inventors, they were entrepreneurs, and they've done some amazing things with their culture of their institution, for example. So that's how it started. And we followed the AAAS model. It just so happened that President of AAAS and I had worked together prior, and so they gave us full kind of use of their approach. And that's why our Fellows pin is identical to AAAS Fellow pin, except it's green and gold. So all those that are AAAS Fellows, you can put them next to each other and kind of have a bilateral thing. But that's kind of how that pin evolved. So what do we have in our Fellows program? This, of course, is our hallmark program. It's the one that we've been quite noticed for. But we have, again, 757 fellows representing 229 research institutions. There are 90-plus presidents and senior leaders within the NAI Fellows program. We have a number of Nobel laureates, many that come to the meeting as well. And we have probably close to half of our members are fellows or members of other national academies. But if you look at the economic impact of our fellows, it's amazing. And I mentioned the 1.1 million jobs, but their companies that they've started and the technologies that you've licensed out had revenue generation of over $100 billion. These are numbers that are going to be important to us in the next year or two or three as we get our message across to government agencies and various other places that we do a lot, that academic invention does a lot, that we do work with industry, we do our training students to join this economy. And so I think that's going to be very important. The induction is always a great event, and so this evening we have our NAI Fellows induction. There will be 175 fellows being inducted this year. We have the whole John F. Kennedy Library to ourselves, and so it should be a great event. Keep in mind that this year we also have some of the previous year's inductees coming in. So when you were, for those that are fellows here, when you were told you were going to be a fellow, we gave you 2 years, okay, to come to an induction ceremony. So this is the first time we have some from the previous year as well. So among our fellows for this year, we have 5,500 issued patents, just among those fellows, just amazing. And they represent 135 research universities. I don't think you'll find another national academy, when you look at the membership that they do, and they announce every year, that will have covered such a geodiverse group of universities and states within this country. Okay, so what's benefits of fellowship? Benefits are really that we provide a venue to support and encourage innovative culture change across the globe, network and engage. Hopefully you're networking here with others and senior leadership. Opportunity to serve on national committees, that's becoming more and more, especially as other groups see the extent of our fellows and our members. Public policy involvement through service, and we'll be doing more of that. I'll be talking, and peer review opportunities. We did our first peer review, third-party peer review in cybersecurity in the past few months, which went well. And other opportunities for mentoring and students as well. We have some other things the board talked about, in fact, last night, that we'd really love fellows to be involved with that will be coming out. The fellows program, if you look at academic analytics, that is a third-party group that many universities, AAU and other places use to look at high-level awards. And so the NAI Fellows program is right up there with the National Academy of Engineering and the other ones as well. So we've been really pleased. The number of nominations has almost equaled the other academies, and it's just amazing. And we've been pretty specific on the type of the basic background that fellows need to have. Okay, so in order to be qualified, at least to be looked at. So in most of them that we do qualify, and hopefully. The hope is that all these great people will get into the academy at some point, which would be great. So just yesterday, is today the 5th, right? So today is the 6th. So 2 days ago, we had Chairman Lamar Smith from Texas 21st District honored the fellows in the Congressional Record. So he honored the 175 inventors inducted into the 2016 Fellows of the National Academy of Inventors. And this was important this year that we got Lamar Smith to do the Congressional Record because he is chairman of the Science, Space, and Technology Committee of Congress. And that was important to us. He's been a strong supporter of our charter. And I think, and he's a Republican, but so he has some insight into what's going on in Congress on that side at least. But I think what's important is if you look at his report, take a look sometime at his report of his committee, the Congressional Committee on Science, Space, and Technology, and what you'll see is that committee really recommended increasing budget for science in this country. And so it's good to see that committee and himself are strong supporters. I want to thank Rob Duncan, who's one of our board members from Texas Tech. Rob, thank you for for helping that and for when we met with him at his office in Washington. So, frequently asked questions. I know a number of you have. What is the criteria? We kind of talked about it. You have to have a U.S. patent to be a fellow. You have to be affiliated with an academic entity. We've had questions about industry being involved, and we're exploring those opportunities more. We do let industry people in, but they have to be affiliated with an academic institution at this point. We do have a committee, though, that's working on industry affiliations more. They have to be nominated by peers. There's no self-nominations. And right now, the median patent count for fellows is about 19. And there are dues for fellows. It's the same dues the other national academies pretty well have. And those dues, though, go directly to support the fellows program. So what about our charter legislation? This is a bill that has been put forward. It was in the last Congress. It's in this Congress. We're getting additional members, a lot, during these early months. The legislation would congressionally recognize the NEI as an organization with significant national interests stemming from our mission, goals, and objectives of the organization. It's a bipartisan bill that's very important and currently has, we have more sponsors than 7, but we do have a number of sponsors that's growing. But we do need your help. We do need your help in reaching out to your own legislators, your own congressional legislators, and ask them to support the bill to sign on. We do have a government affairs person that will work with you. Monica, is Monica here? Nope, okay, so she will work with your group, and we will be approaching our fellows and some other individual members. We've heard that that will help, and reach out to your own Congress people in order to help move this bill forward. Let me just say, the only other academy that was ever started by charter was the National Academy of Science, and that was under Abraham Lincoln. And the other 2 academies for the National Academy of Sciences are under that original charter. So we are asking for a charter many years later in a different time. But so far things look very positive. Okay, so we are leading the national conversation. We talked about changing academic culture. You've heard the panel today. This was a paper that kind of came out. We've heard the history of that, and that we're working close with APLU and AAU in trying to move this issue of tenure and promotion, training, et cetera, forward. It's been one of our devout missions early on. We do publish the top 100 universities for patents and licensing. We get the data directly from the patent office. We use the intellectual property owners' way that they do their metrics, which means that if the university is not a licensee, it's not on the metric. But we do, it's been 5 years now, and this metric is used by a number of states and a number of organizations as a third-party metric for that. We've released our NII activities report. This was our first activities report ever. If you haven't seen it, it's on the web. We do have hard copies. And it has highlighted articles of inventors and sustaining member institutions. And it provides an overview of all our NII programs. And the next publication will be this summer. If you want to be involved in the publication of this, or have your institution involved, or fellows that you know or members, please do so. We do publish a journal. How many people made it to the breakfast this morning? Thanks for doing that. And so the journal, it continues to grow. It will grow faster now that we own the whole journal. And we encourage you to really submit. One of the things is especially as you look at senior inventors like ourselves in many of this, I don't think many of us need to really worry so much about high-impact journals. Our students like that, and it's important for that, but there are opportunities many times where we want to get our message out there, get it out in open access, and grow in other journals. And so I would encourage you to write articles for the journal. This is a place for you to publish your research. It's a place for you to publish your ideas. We do NAI profiles of fellows. I would encourage you strongly to do this. Also, fellows, we followed the old, as I mentioned this morning, we Remember when PNAS, if you remember, the National Academies of Science, you could submit or handle for editorial review a number of papers for PNAS. We're following that format. And so if you're a fellow and you have a paper that you can help edit and push through for another group or person, I'd encourage you to do that as well. Okay, and Eric Fossum is the other editor-in-chief, and I encourage you to reach out to Eric and Kim, who runs the journal, on that behalf. It is a growing journal. It is becoming viable financially. When we go to 6 issues a year, I think it'll even be more viable, and so that's important for us. The MOU with the U.S. Patent and Trademark Office, this is absolutely important. You will see the U.S. Commissioner of Patents today. He's in town. He will come and give the medals to the fellows. He is a very strong supporter of the NAI, and we have a great relationship. And even though it's a politically appointed position, the likelihood is that he will stay for a number of years as the Commissioner of Patents. So we extended the MOU about 2 months ago between the NAI and the USPTO. It allows for the two groups to work closely on mutually beneficial projects to enrich education, outreach, honors and awards, and programs relating to intellectual property. And we do have the Fellows Ceremony every other year at the USPTO. So it's wonderful being in Boston, but next year we will be in Washington, and we will be doing the Fellows Ceremony at the USPTO. And the USPTO has an ex officio seat on the board of directors. Elizabeth, if she's in the audience, represents the USPTO on our board. And they will be hosting a town hall this afternoon. The commissioners here, as well as a few others from the USPTO, and there will be a town hall this afternoon between 3 and 4 that I will help partake in with them. I want to thank our hosting institutions. This is what's so important about the every other year when we go to a university setting. And this has been an incredible one, that when we reached out to our member institutions in Boston, every one of them came forward and provided support for this. And you know what else, and I don't think you've seen this, is that they have provided volunteer support in the front desk and in various other places for us, so that we didn't have to bring, we have a small staff in Tampa that they have provided. So you'll go out there, you'll see people from Brown or Harvard or other places that are helping with the meeting. So this has been a great meeting for that. We look forward to a similar meeting in 2 years somewhere in the United States. So if you have an interest in your city to have the NAI there, please come and see us, because we have not picked yet where we will be. I want to thank our sponsors as well. Some of these sponsors have been with us for years, but they have helped this meeting go forward. You know, of course, about the Lemelson Foundation. The corridor is one that's personal to me, and Randy Barrage is here, who, from the state of Florida, this is a state of Florida initiative, part of their economic development, and they have been a strong supporter of the NAI since its inception. They feel it's one of the Florida startups, in essence, but we take advantage of that. Well, we can, but thank you. We do want to have the 10th anniversary meeting we've talked about this a little bit, and we love your views on it, of the NAI, which will be in 4 years in Tampa again, where we started. So I don't know if you like Tampa, Florida during the nice season, but we'd love to have it there and have everyone there and have a good time. So I think I want you to save the date. This is next year's meeting. If you want to write it down, it's April 4th to April 6th. It will be in Washington, D.C. We have already have a hotel. And for those that have not been to the Mayflower Hotel, this is one of the most wonderful hotels in Washington, and it'll be just absolutely great. And so I encourage you to come to the meeting next year, bring some family, enjoy Washington, and hopefully we'll have some great weather on April 4th. And that is it. So that is your academy, and thank you so much. And why don't we go out there and have some great lunch, and then great afternoon, and then we'll go to the Kennedy Library and have some fun. So thank you so much.